U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington will take action to prevent espionage by Chinese students. His comments come ahead of an expected news conference where President Donald Trump is due to outline his response to China's plans to impose a national security law in Hong Kong. The U.S. has tried to call for a United Nations Security Council meeting to discuss the issue, but China says it will not let the United States, quote, kidnap the organization.
美方要求安理会讨论涉港问题，公然干涉中国内政，肆意破坏国际关系基本准则，中方理所当然地坚决反对。他们的图谋绝不会得逞。安理会不是美国可以随意摆布的工具。中国及国际上主持正义的国家，不会允许美国为自身目的
The pro-Beijing government in Hong Kong has also warned the U.S. against meddling. It says removing the city's special status could backfire on the U.S. economy. Now, the matter continues to draw international concern.
Well, for a closer look, we're joined by Associate Professor Ian Chong from the NUS Department of Political Science. Professor, so what are the implications of American actions on Asian economy and the rest of the world?
So I think on the bigger scale, what we see is a representation of increased U.S.-China friction. It's very concentrated in Hong Kong because it's the interface between China and the United States, but this can possibly flow out. On smaller scales, we see things like possibly the flow of funds, especially private assets from Hong Kong to other places, including Singapore. So there may be a sort of short-term change on that front. However, I think on the longer term, it depends on the kinds of U.S. actions that come in. If there are more restrictions on Chinese funding, on where Chinese funds are coming from, who they're associated with, then getting caught in the middle, for countries like Singapore, who are getting some of this money from Hong Kong, business opportunities from Hong Kong, those opportunities can become more challenging as the need comes in to navigate between the U.S. and China.
Prof, during such a time when the world is still trying to recover from COVID-19, how is this going to sway growth and confidence in businesses? Is this something that, is the last thing we wanted?
Well, it's not ideal, but I mean, even before COVID-19, we've seen the U.S. and China friction between the U.S. and China ramp up. So this is going to continue. It's going to exacerbate. It's not ideal, but, we have the world that we have, not the world that we want.
So you mentioned that it's not ideal. So what kind of an impact will Singapore see in terms of economics then?
So when we see greater U.S.-China friction, one of the things about Singapore is that, like Hong Kong, we have benefited historically from being the interface between markets in Asia and markets in the U.S. and investment from various places. Now, if there going to be more restrictions on the kinds of business that can happen, if it's going to be more costly to provide that sort of interface, if there's less demand for the interface, then over the medium term, the Singapore economy might not see the kind of growth that we would prefer, especially as we try to come out of the COVID-19 situation.
Some Chinese officials have actually warned that they are not going to take things lying down if President Trump does take action. Do we have any sense on how far, if any, these measures will go?
So I'm almost certain that the Chinese would react. A lot of this will depend on the kinds of actions that the U.S. takes and how serious the Chinese side thinks these actions are. So we will see rounds of tit for tat. And for these kinds of things, the big unknown that I will say is escalation. Both sides will want to maintain escalation control, but whether they can do so, given uncertainty, given friction, no one really knows. So I think we should all be prepared for a rough ride, most directly in Hong Kong, but even in Singapore and other Asian economies.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. Associate Professor Ian Chong from NUS Department of Political Science.